Good morning, APUSH. We are coming to you today from the Sears dining room. I want to see if maybe it'll record better from in here because I'm close to the router, closer to the Wi-Fi. See, there's the Wi-Fi. That's an old sewing machine. There's the Wi-Fi. So maybe that'll do it. I don't really know. I guess we'll see. We're turning our dining room into kind of our office-y workspace. I don't really know what we're doing. Distance learning has been very special for the Sears family, as I'm sure it has for you guys. So I have, after I put this video out, I'm going to go ahead and publish my website so that the period review cover page is up under period review, under review resources. So it'll be the last sub page on the cover page, because it's the last cover page. I have also posted everything, all the assignments to Focus. I'm going to work on posting them to Turnitin as well, for those of you that are more comfortable submitting to Turnitin. So I have periods 1 through 7 up on Focus, but not yet up on Turnitin. Okay, and I have the schedule, and I wrote you guys a letter, and that's it. So what we're going to do in this video is we are going to go over time period 2, the time period 2 cover page, the time period 2 period review. So the time period 2 starts in 1607 and ends in 1754. So one of the things that you guys need to kind of think about, if you are not really a date person, but one of the things that kind of helps you remember the dates is the starting and stopping points of those time periods. The College Board selects those dates because something significant happened in them. So if you can kind of remember, oh, time period 2 goes from 1607 to 1754, then you may be able to actually put some dates in between, right, and sort of make a date sandwich. And then you'll be able to get it all going from there. So that then now you're activating knowledge and you can remember some of the things that you were, some of the facts. You have a context for remembering some of those facts. So 1607 is selected as the beginning of time period 2 because that is when the Jamestown colony is founded. The Jamestown colony is founded in 1607. 1619, we have the African slave trade continuing. 1620, the Pilgrims land with the Mayflower, and we know that. We did this Mayflower Compact. 1626 is the colony of New Amsterdam, which then rolls into becoming New York later on. 1630, we have Boston, and Boston is the one that's the city on the hill. So remember, this is the colonial time period, so the colonies are going to start to get a little bit confusing, and you might start to kind of mix them up. So you want to really use that colonies foldable that we did at the beginning of the year that you guys were mad that I made you do. So yeah, you may want to go ahead and use that to help you remember and review all of the colonies. Okay, Anne Hutchinson was banished in 1637. 1662 is the halfway covenant. That's the thing where you remember it was really super difficult to be a Puritan. It was like really intense to be a Puritan. And the Puritan congregations were losing followers pretty significantly because people were like, it's already hard to be a colonist. We also don't want to be a Puritan in addition to that. So they started the halfway covenant, which was like, you don't have to be born into Puritanism. And they sort of like halved what all the rules were, so you can kind of be part of a Puritan and still be part of the congregation to gain followers. King Philip's War happened in 1675. That was when King Philip went through the colonies with his men, and they killed a bunch of colonists. So it was the Native Americans trying to assert their authority in their land to get rid of the colonists. 1680 to 1692 was the Pueblo Revolt. That was the thing in the southwestern United States. There's notes on my website about that because it's not in the book, but it could theoretically be something that you would use on the AP exam. And that was the one where the Pueblos, it's a significant example because the Pueblos are the only Native American tribe, one of the only Native American tribes, especially during this time period, they're the only Native American tribe who was able to organize a successful revolt against a colonial power. And they held on to their autonomy for 12 years, which is very significant. 1689, Locke writes 2 treatises on government. That's when he comes up with the natural rights theory, which we know is going to be super important later. 1692, Salem witchcraft hysteria. The College Board had taken those out of the benchmarks, but it's still important. 1718, New Orleans is established by the Acadians. 1725 is the Middle Passage. 1733 is a slave revolt in the West Indies. 1735 is the John Peter Zenger trial. The College Board kind of likes to ask questions about that trial because it's the first example of freedom of the press before we ever even had that as an individual freedom, because we didn't have governing documents for the colonies yet, or have our own governing documents. And so the John Peter Zenger trial, though, they were I guess the royal courts sided with the press on that. And then 1744 is the Great Awakening and Jonathan Edwards. That's the sinners at the hands of an angry God, the dangling the spider over the spider, we're the spider, and God is dangling us over the fiery pits of hell. Jonathan Edwards. I think we read an excerpt. Okay, so now we're on the continuities part. Can you see mine? There's my continuities. So my continuities that I picked up was the slave trade, and the specific example is the slave trade. Religious freedom, and a specific example is the Mayflower Compact, which we read. Colonial settlement, and the examples I put are Jamestown and Plymouth. Make sure that you have some specific examples of those colonies kind of in your back pocket so you can remember them, specific examples of the regions and the colonies in those regions, and then what those colonies did. And again, the colonies foldable is a good way for you to study that. That's why we did it. Religious revival is another continuity. We're constantly kind of trying to reinvent ourselves religiously. And the Second Great Awakening is the example that I put. Revolts is another continuity. We're constantly rebelling against various authorities. So I put the slave revolt, the Pueblo, slave revolt in the West Indies, King Philip's War, and the Pueblo Revolt as my examples. Okay, so for changes, for immigration, I put immigration, movement of people to settle colonies. I put religion, the Second Great Awakening, Jonathan Edwards, and spiritual recovery. I put free press and free speech with the John Peter Zenger trial. Now, a note about the continuities and changes. If you think too hard about this, it could break your brain, because the continuities, sometimes in United States history, change is our continuity, right? The idea that we are constantly changing and constantly evolving as a nation, the fact that we do it so consistently and with regularity becomes a continuity, right? So don't necessarily overthink it, but don't worry. Just know that that is fluid. You could use immigration as a continuity, but you could also use it as a change, right? It kind of depends on the context with which you're using it, and it depends on how you explain it. Same thing with religion. You can use religion and individual freedoms as a continuity in this country, but you can also use them as a change because they're change agent. You see what I'm saying? So you can take them and slice them however it works to fit your needs. And so that's an important thing for you guys to think about. Okay, now we're going to go to causes and effects. So the first event that I have is colonial America. And the long-term effect, the long-term cause of colonial America is the desire, is colonization of the global powers. The short-term cause is the desire, the lack of resources and the availability of resources in the colonies. The effects of colonial America, the short-term effect would be that people move there. And the long-term effect would be that we are here now. So there's that. Indian revolts is the next event that I put. The long-term cause of Indian revolts is the exploration and the settlement of the establishment of these colonies. The short-term cause is the oppression of the various powers of the Native Americans. The effect in the short term, to some extent, is that the Native Americans were able to scare the colonists and exert a little bit of authority. The long-term effect is that the Native Americans end up being removed from the area so that the white settlers can make their living on this continent. And you could even argue that a long-term effect would be Indian removal and the subjugation of Native American tribes on our continent. Comparison, you can compare Indian revolts and slave revolts. You can compare and contrast Jamestown and Plymouth, New Amsterdam and Boston. You can compare and contrast any of the colonies. You also can do it regionally. You can compare and contrast the colonial regions. You can do the Chesapeake and New England. You can do the middle colonies and the southern colonies. You can do them economically. You can do them culturally. You can do them religiously. You can do their relationship with Native Americans. There's a lot to compare and contrast in this unit. You also can compare and contrast Puritans and Quakers. All right. Big ideas. So the big ideas for time period 2 include, here's my big ideas. So the big ideas for time period 2 include the colonies, Plymouth, Jamestown, the Chesapeake, New England, the Restoration colonies, the Carolinas, and New England. Mercantilism and the mercantilist system is another big idea. Slavery, the Great Awakening, religion in the colonies and the relationship that religion had in settling the colonies, the Enlightenment and the Enlightenment as a catalyst for settlement of the colonies, the Indian Wars, colonial rebellions, the Albany Plan of Union, and the John Peters Anger Trial. At this point, I would recommend starting to pull your time period essays, as I have done. See, I have the time period 2 essay questions that I've given you guys, and I stapled those to the back of my period review, and just kind of start looking at the ones that are more expansive and see if you can kind of, just start to look for trends and see if you can make plans, right, for all of that. So what I would say to you guys at this point in time is we're doing these. Again, they're self-paced, so the due dates up there are suggestions. If you want to do them all at once, that's fine. I'll start grading them and putting them in the grade book. I'll also start grading your LEQs and putting those in the grade book. Don't stress about the LEQs. You guys already wrote them. If you didn't write them because you were absent or whatever, we did it before spring break. If you didn't write it because you were absent or whatever the reason, I'll get in touch and we'll figure out a way for you to do it. I hope you guys are doing well. I miss you, and don't hesitate to contact me on Remind or on email if you have any questions. And I will see you when I make the next video.